Continuing with our focus on the skies, space situational awareness company Digantara has raised $10 million in a Series A1 funding round to further develop its revolutionary space mission assurance platform, also known as SpaceMap. The round was led by Peak 15 partners with participation from Kalari Capital. Digantara also recently launched 2 missions that served as a space weather testbed. To talk to us about the future roadmap and how Digantara plans to make space sustainable, joining me now is its co-founder and CEO Anirudh Sharma. Anirudh, welcome to Startup Street. First, if you could explain in a layman's language what you do with space becoming more congested and contested. Anirudh, tell us how Digantara is enabling safer space operations, what is unique about your infrastructure and your multimodal data pool.
Thank you so much for having me here, Shruti. At Digantara, we work on space situational awareness. What it means is tracking and knowing of what is happening in space. To a certain extent, we can also characterize an object. So basically, it's more or less like, in a layman's language, it's more or less like Google Maps, which helps you navigate on Earth. But we're doing something similar for space where every space activity can be monitored, and we can help satellite operators or anyone who is performing any space activity to navigate in the orbit safely without having collision. Having looked at the past and how the space industry has changed, we have more than 6,000 active satellites and 1 million space debris. At such a pace, when the industry is moving, it requires an infrastructure to grow on. And that is something that we're bringing to the table with our space mission assurance platform.
All right. Anirudh, with the fresh funds raised, you plan to invest heavily in your space tech infrastructure to track previously unobservable objects like you just mentioned. So how do you plan to do this? And most importantly, how does this empower your stakeholders in efficient decision making?
So there are two different ways to characterize and track an object in space. One is the ground-based systems like radars and telescopes that you can put on ground and track objects in space. And these can only do up to a certain extent, which is up to around 20 centimeter in size. You can track an object from ground. Below that, it becomes difficult for any ground-based systems to track an object in the orbit. Hence, we complement the ground-based infrastructure with our space-based infrastructure that will help us to track objects below 20 centimeter in size up to single centimeter. That will add more to the catalog that we're building, and that will give you more data points about what happens in space. So what it will happen to, what it'll bring to the stakeholders is basically, it becomes easy for them to make decisions because this will not have any false positives. You have more data points of what's happening in the orbit, so that you can do maneuvers without having to spend and optimize a lot of fuel.
All right. While I understand that the fresh infusion of capital will allow you to deploy the first phase of Digantara's space-based surveillance satellite constellation, but I also believe there are also plans to accelerate the development of your downstream SSA service by Q2 of 2024. What's the play here? Give us the details.
So there are 3 steps to what we are building. The first step is the infrastructure layer, where we are building our own satellites that can track objects in space. And the second step of our solution is mostly a data fusion and data processing engine. We crowdsource data like Google does. They collect data from everywhere, from your phones, from their own infrastructure that they have to understand what's happening around the surroundings. So we do something similar where we crowdsource data not only from the centers that we launch to space, but also from other sources like the government departments that are tracking objects in space. There are commercial companies providing data sets. And the last part of our solution is the analytics. And this is where we work on the downstream part of our space situational awareness platform with the space management platform, where we want to, regardless of our infrastructure fully deployed in the orbit, we want to go out in the market because we have innovation across the value chain of what we're developing in terms of astrodynamics. Hence, we want to go out in the market in Q2 of next year, where we provide these services to different stakeholders, starting with defense, and provide this as a service to users from commercial to insurance industry.
Okay. Like you mentioned earlier in the interview, you want to build a platform as powerful and sophisticated as Google Maps, serving as a foundational layer for space operations and astrodynamics research. Anirudh, talk to me about the business and revenues. What kind of money are you making?
So Space Mission Assurance Platform is something similar to any SaaS model, where we provide our services on a subscription basis. This is for a commercial user. Now we have different segments in the space industry itself that we cater our services to. Hence, the model at which we price a customer is very different. For example, for a commercial user, we do a subscription pricing where they have to subscribe to our platform per satellite that they launch every single month, so that we provide them service of basic space situational awareness and help the satellite operation itself, because we provide this as a service to the end user with our space mission assurance platform. And the last thing that we do with our platform is basically provide this as a service to defense stakeholders, that is mostly on contract basis to different user in the defense industry and government industry, where it can be regulators wanting this as a service or defense stakeholders wanting this as a service, where they want to build sovereign capability to a particular nation, be it India or Singapore, that we're already working with.
All right. One final question, Anirudh, before I let you go, and if you could quickly answer that. Digantra has also begun the development of India's first commercial SSA optical observatory in Uttarakhand. Tell me, what will this observatory do? By when will the facility be ready, and for whom? If you could take us through the details again.
Like I mentioned, what we do is mainly launching satellites with sensors on it that can track objects in the orbit. Apart from that, to complement what we're already building in the orbit, there are no sensors in this part of the world. Hence, we want to complement our space-based infrastructure with a ground-based infrastructure at this part of the world where we don't have any sensors. So we are developing a optical observatory in Uttarakhand, where we set up a telescope that can track objects in both low Earth orbit and geostationary orbit, that can help us track active satellites. This is mostly from the defense standpoint. We are building this observatory in India that can help us to provide more data points to the Indian government on what's happening in the orbit, mainly specific to defense stakeholders like Defense Space Agency and Indian Air Force, where they can understand what is the movement of satellites of different countries over this particular location.
Anirudh,
and we are planning to make it operational probably by the end of this year. There's been a bit of a challenge on procuring the
land. All right. So hopefully by end of this year, Anirudh, we've completely run out of time, but wish you the very best in all your plans, and many thanks for joining us on Startup Street today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
With that, it's time for us to take a short break. But up next, Havana Capital has raised $70 million for the first close of its climate fund. We speak to its founder on the other side on their fundraising plans and much more. Stay tuned.